Do you ever wonder why Alex Jones is just so damn popular? I can never get over it. I just can't get over it. Whenever he appears on a podcast, he draws phenomenal numbers. He's had two recent appearances on Joe Rogan, one with 24 million views, which is about a year ago, and one from about 2 weeks ago with 13 million views. He recently appeared on Tim Pool's podcast, and he's racked up nearly 1 million views in only 10 hours. So I really think that we have to ask ourselves why. Just why is Alex Jones capable of drawing such a crowd? Just the mere mention of his name seems to get the internet abuzz and everyone wondering, well, where's he going to be next? And so I thought I'd go through a few theories that I have on this because I think it's worth understanding. Because I think that Alex Jones represents a kind of side to the internet that has been sanitized and cleansed that I think everyone's kind of missing. So the first few are fairly obvious ones. For example, he's a charismatic person. He is innately enjoyable to watch. He's not boring. He seems quite friendly, but above all, he's incredibly spontaneous. Often, I think this has been puffed up for effect, but it's still very entertaining nonetheless. And this ties into theory 2, is that you just don't know what he's going to say next. Now, not knowing what's about to happen is the secret of comedy. If you know the end of a joke in advance, the joke is not funny. It's the fact that your mind is being taken to strange and unexpected places that tickles you and elicits this reaction. And there's no denying that Alex Jones is, well, honestly, he's the master of this. Who knows what's going to come out of his mouth next? I didn't know that he was going to be talking about Bohemian Grove with Joe Rogan or interdimensional blood-sucking, child-predating vampires on Tim Pool. And judging by Tim's face, I guess he didn't see that coming either. But this is the thing. He can talk effortlessly at high volume and high speed for what seems to be hours. And it seems that he's got this strange well of energy inside of him to talk about all these things. And presumably this is because conspiracy theories have broadly been banned from the public discourse. Now, if you go back a few years, you'll have noticed that conspiracy theories were enormous on platforms like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all the others, because people, I think, have got a natural inclination to try and fill in the gaps where their knowledge is absent with something that explains a causal relation from A to C. Point B has to be filled in. And Alex Jones is very good about doing that. And since conspiracy theories have been banned, he's also become a kind of forbidden fruit. So there may well be conspiratorial narratives that people would like to hear volunteered, because perhaps in these narratives there is a grain of truth scattered in along the way, if you can just wade through the nonsense to get to it. And so I think there's an aspect of us that likes to see the forbidden fruit being presented to those who would forbid it. But I think generally Alex Jones is taken to be entertainment. And I think that he comes across as reasonably non-threatening, even when he's talking about 1776 commencing again and an uprising against the government. It all seems to be very abstract, and it's all framed in a very defensive manner, as if the government is coming to get, they are coming to get him. And he doesn't come across as if he's trying to get anyone else. He's more trying to stake out his own position. And given the way that he's been attacked in the mainstream, it feels unfair to try and characterize him as being unnecessarily defensive. But generally, he's not a hateful person, or at least he doesn't appear to be a hateful person. He doesn't talk about race or gender or sexuality or any of this sort of thing. And when he does, it's always with the kind of misunderstanding of a well-intentioned uncle or, someone of that sort of nature. He's not ever giving any kind of scathing critique of people in group terms, because really politically he's rather tame and he's rather milquetoast as American politics goes. He's just a kind of anti-government libertarian, which is a very popular position in the United States and in other countries. He just wants to be left alone and pay fewer taxes. He doesn't really have any great radical revolutionary thoughts in his head because he supports the American Revolution. But I think all of this isn't really... I think all of this is part of the tapestry as to why Alex Jones is actually bearable for so many people, at the very least. And then you have to take into account, I think he's representing now some kind of id of the internet. He's the kind of person who infers a lot of intent from his own gut instincts. Oh, I know these people are doing this thing because I'm sure of it. And there might be evidence to imply that you could take a reading that that was the case. He reminds you of a crazy uncle who's just read too many David Icke books and wants to talk to you about the Illuminati. But again, all of these are abstract concepts that you couldn't really put a name or a face to, although I'm doubtless Alex Jones does put names and faces to these things. But there's no immediate concern when he's talking about all these things. And so I think that he just generally does come across as entertainment. But he's also not afraid to make fun of himself. I mean, you can see him. There are enough pictures of him with tinfoil hats, and I believe on Tim Pool's podcast, a tinfoil beanie. So it's all done with a sense of irony. And his own lawyers argued that he was playing a character in his legal defense when he got a divorce. And I think there's probably more truth to that than not. But when you package all of this together, you've got a really, really entertaining show. You've got just a phenomenal ball of energy who's going to tell you things you weren't expecting to hear and is going to make you laugh along the way. And there's something that is legitimating about this. He's expressing the more human side of the internet, because the internet now seems to be a lot more sanitized and corporate and safe for advertisers, whereas Alex Jones is anything but that, really, unless of course you sell Brainforce. But he seems to be a mechanism of legitimizing this kind of human side, and I think that the raw numbers that he brings in just can't really be argued with. I mean, 24 million views on Joe Rogan's podcast, that's amazing. 1 million views in 10 hours on Tim Pool, that's amazing. He draws the crowds because he's entertaining and he is speaking to them as a human. He is not simply a corporate mouthpiece. I mean, the very idea of suggesting that Alex Jones somehow represents an interest that isn't Alex Jones, which in his view is the interest of a sort of populist commentator, whether you agree with him or not. But anyway, that was just some thoughts I had on just why does Alex Jones manage to draw these phenomenal crowds. I mean, you might think he'd start his own YouTube channel or something, mightn't you?